Lincoln in his first inaugural address, and Jefferson after he was president, said that there was not a single word in the Constitution that gave the judiciary any more authority or power to determine what is and is not unconstitutional than either of the other two branches. And Lincoln said if we ever get to the point where a decision of the United States Supreme Court applies to the entire country, to every citizen, as it does to the two parties involved in a lawsuit, we will have lost a free government. And yet even conservative lawyers today will say, whatever the Supreme Court says it is, it is. I think as a U.S. Senator, I have a constitutional duty to render independent judgment of what is and is not constitutional. So that's a big concern that I would, as a senator, I would exercise that judgment. What I think ought to dominate the debate for the United States Senate in Michigan in 2012, however, is this. And politicians, you've always seen them go on TV and take credit. You know, they talk about what Obama last week said, we created these many millions of jobs, or whatever, how many ever was. Politicians created them. So since they're quick to claim credit, surely you are as confident as I am that Debbie Stabenow will be quick to accept responsibility for the fact that on her watch, in the 10 years she's been in the United States Senate, we have lost in this state alone 800,000 private sector jobs. Worst job loss in America. Any number of things we could do to stimulate job creation for America and Michigan, but I'm going to mention three that I would propose as a U.S. Senator. I've already mentioned one with which I have some expertise. We ought to pass a state right-to-work law, and I think we ought to pass a national right-to-work law. Every American ought to be free to choose, but it's not just a freedom issue, it is a job creation issue. In the last decade, the 5 top states for creating new jobs, led by Texas, which created 800,000 even in this recession, all right-to-work states. And the bottom 5 that lost the most jobs, with Michigan bringing up the rear, are all compulsory pay-up or you're fired states. It's a major element in where a corporation, domestically and around the world, decides to locate its new corporate plant sites and create jobs. As a U.S. Senator, I'll join every member of the Tea Party caucus as a co-sponsor of the National Right to Work Act. Number 2, drill baby drill, frack baby frack. We've got an estimated 1 trillion barrels of oil in these 50 United States, which is more than the other 10 top oil-producing countries in the world. Why are we an oil-buying country? We should be an oil-selling country, and this principle applies across the board. Our federal government policy is so consistently at odds with common sense and the will of the people that I think it takes more imagination to believe they're just incompetent or ignorant. A president who went to Columbia Law School and served on Harvard Law Review. I think they know exactly what they're doing, and are doing it on purpose to destabilize this country economically, make many more millions of Americans dependent on the government, supplement it with illegal immigration in hopes of locking in a permanent voting bloc for the party that hands out all the goodies on purpose. Drill, baby, drill. Penn State says if we'll just develop our own oil and gas resources, we will create 800,000 American oil and gas jobs. And in the process, we can tell Saudi Arabia and Iran to go pound their ample supply of sand. We don't need their oil. We'll be energy secure. Number 3, dramatically reduce or eliminate the capital gains tax, the inheritance tax, the personal income tax, the corporate income tax. And just as an example, there's an estimated $1.2 trillion that American companies have made in other countries, sitting in Cayman Island and Swiss bank accounts they won't bring back on shore because as soon as they hit the beach, they've got to write a 35% check to the federal government. This is not rocket science, folks. If it was your money, where would you invest it? In the U.S. with the highest corporate income tax in the world, or in Ireland where it's only 12? 1 minute. Obviously, you'd invest it where you had to pay the lowest taxes. If we want to bring that money back on shore to create American jobs, then we've got to become more competitive on the corporate tax rate. But the ideal, in my opinion, is to eliminate them all. Pass what's called a fair tax. And if you don't know how it works, look it up at fairtax.com. Not only would we stimulate job creation, bring all of the black market into paying taxes, because it's a tax paid at the point of purchase, but because it would be collected at the point of purchase, just like the state sales tax, we would not need, and therefore could shut down and mothball the most hated and feared agency of the American government, the Internal Revenue Service. And that's not the best part. The best part is the peace of mind and freedom that we remove from our and our children's and grandchildren's lives, that black cloud. Am I going to get audited? Am I going to be guilty till I'm proven innocent? That doesn't have to be part of the American experience if we restructure our taxes appropriately.
Just simply going to say ditto with one asterisk. And that is, and it would take, I'd be glad to come back for the debate as to whether the fair tax or flat tax is more effective. That's probably the only issue that Gary and I disagree. Here's the more important question you have to ask yourself. You've got to ask yourself, how do we beat Pete Hoekstra, who unfortunately is ducking too many of these conversations? And that's wrong. It's wrong, don't you agree? The second question is, who's in the best position to beat Debbie Stabenow? Now let's talk about this. We got to be very real about this, both in the primary and in the general. I'm going to talk about the primary for a second. And I hate to disagree with Cindy on anything, because I think what she's doing is absolutely fabulous. But I'm going to tell you the reality of something. The Tea Parties are beginning to be split about this convention, number one. Now, because the Tea Parties are all independent. One of our candidates, Pete Konecki, just sent out a letter saying he's not even going to participate. That's number one. Number two, it will not follow that this money's going to flow to whoever gets this nomination at this convention. I know, I've talked to the people. You know what they're looking for? There are 33 Senate races. They want to win at least 6 of them. And they're looking for one thing. No, excuse me, 2 things. Where do you stand on the issues? And can you generate the resources to beat Debbie Stabenow, and in this case, Pete Hoekstra first? I mean, at the end of the day, make your decision about which candidate you support in terms of ideas. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, you have to decide, how do we beat Pete Hoekstra, who is, by the way, a good man. He's just voted wrong. And then, how do we beat Debbie Stabenow? In 4 months, and from people, many of whom I don't even know, we have generated $1.3 million for this campaign to help in the primary and to begin to build the base for the general. Now, I'm going to share a little statistic with you here that you need to be aware of. When Cindy mentions, you know, that the 13,000 Tea Party people, let me give you a sense of how these primaries play out. In the gubernatorial primary, there were 1 million votes cast, and they were split between 4 candidates. Rick Snyder got 381,000, Pete Hoekstra got 280,000, Mike Cox, who's endorsed Pete Hoekstra, got 240,000, Mike Bouchard got 127, and Tom George got 16,000. You cannot reach over 500,000 people without serious money. And interestingly enough, my money, and you see, I'm a great believer that the sunlight is a great disinfectant. I don't care who knows where my money's coming from, and it's all in small donations. But interestingly enough, it's from many of the people who support Freedom Works. It's from many of the people who support Club for Growth. It's from many of the people who support the Heritage Foundation. They're already playing their cards, because they know to beat Debbie Stabenow and to have a candidate who can beat Debbie Stabenow, it's got to start now. August will be here tomorrow. August will be here tomorrow. Not in February. It has to start now. The resources have to continue to be raised. People have to continue to be educated. This process that Cindy's doing is fabulous. We need prayer. We need educated people. People have to get off their seats, off their couches, and into the arena. Our country's at stake. How many here are veterans? Quickly, raise your hand. Let's give them a round of applause. Are all the veterans who never came home. I want you to think about all of those cemetery markers in overseas lands, even in our own country. Are we living lives worthy of their last full measure of sacrifice? Not unless we all get off the couch. It's so fabulous to be here on a Saturday. We have a job to do. It isn't just winning an election. We have a country to save. That's what this is about, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't just beating Debbie Stabenow. This is a country to save. If I'm your United States Senator, yes, I'll be voting right in the Senate, but I will join with this movement in Michigan and let's take it across the country. Our founders recognized unless it was a countrywide movement, change won't happen.